Ladies and gentlemen, excuse me as I cough all over the place. This has been brewing in my head
And
for
mine.
years. Brandon's too, but forget him because he jumped ship and thinks everything's fine. This is such a touchy, confusing subject.
Let's put it this way. This event, this storyline, this purchase set the course for professional wrestling around the world for the next 15 years. And the aftershock from it is still being felt. Empires have risen, empires have fallen, and things have changed immensely because of this event. And any time we see a superstar associated with this time period or we read about them, we instantly go back to that. Not what they're currently doing. And we think, man, this could have been so different. And the event that we're talking about is not the formation of WrestleMania. It is not the emergence of Hulk Hogan or any of these big names. The event that we're talking about is the WCW purchase and invasion storyline. And Chris, I know this one's a bitter pill for you to swallow, and I know it's a little tough to talk about because you, for the longest time, as long as I've known you, your first love in professional wrestling, you love the industry as a whole. You're not one of the people that likes a certain superstar like I am. You loved a company, and your company was WCW, World Championship Wrestling. Now, you loved ECW too, but WCW was your baby, your pet project, the thing that made you tune in every Monday and then Thursday nights and watch the pay-per-views and collect a massive tape collection.
It was a company I wanted to work for eventually, but now, you never think someone from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, with the steel town and the history of Bruno and the WWEF, YG, whatever it's called this week.
And the WWE domination up
yes.
north would have such a connection to a company based in Atlanta, Georgia.
I would watch WCW on TBS when I was a kid all the time. That was my program. I would watch TBS all weekend because that's what, and then I guess the WB2 or UPN, they would have worldwide on, but that was my mecca. WCW was my thing.
And I arrived at this in a very different way because I was on the WWF side of things and always was, but the thing is, as I got older, I realized competition made everything better. And WWF suffers without competition.
It does.
And
look at it.
There were still people all the way up and down the WCW roster that I admired and liked their work, and I still watched it.
I mean, it was just in 2000. Late '99, you could see '99 in general. WCW was pretty much going good, but then you could see towards the end
there
that
was
it was
an undercurrent.
Yeah.
Something. There was a direction that if they kept going down, something bad was going to happen, and eventually it did.
And you kind of felt like at the end of '99, it's starting to kind of fade out. But the Starrcade was pretty good. I mean, the main event was horrendous because Goldberg and Bret Hart were having a decent match, and then Piper came in and just walked out with the belt and then just handed it back to Bret Hart and walked away because it was a Russo swerve thing. It was crap.
Was that the match that was responsible for Bret Hart's career ending because of the kick, though?
Sort of, yeah, but then he still wrestled in January and some February, I think.
Well, that's what made it worse. He received a crack in the orbital bone in that match.
I think if he would have kind of saw it early and taken a break, I think he would have been able to come back eventually. But I think, because he kept wrestling, it screwed it up. But I really had hope in 2000 because, another thing that really confused me was this. I never knew how many guys were really on the roster because when they had the whole Vince Russo Bischoff combination thing in April 2000, they brought at least 70 guys out on TV, and that looked like most of the roster. But I think there were still a lot of guys under contract that weren't there. So I never really...
And don't forget the amount of people that they were paying that were injured. And I remember seeing a piece where they were still paying guys not to show up and be on the show. Yeah,
so I don't know who was really under contract in 2000 at the time. I know a lot of the Luchador guys still were. And I mean, there was at least 70 guys on Nitro they had, and then another 20 had showed up, and probably another 30, 40 still under contract.
And don't forget the people they had affiliations with in the international ranks. I mean, my God, look at Masahiro Chono and that whole group.
I know, and you don't get that today, that's for sure. But at the time I had high hopes, but then as that whole New Blood thing kind of faded out in June and July, it really sucked. And WCW was just garbage from pretty much the summer 2000. And it started kind of redeeming itself in 2001. We started to see the things turn. They were saying that Bischoff was going to buy the company.
But we had a network that wasn't behind them, and that was the big problem. And also, we had a recovering WWF because, the further McMahon got from the steroid trial, the more money he was able to rake in, to make himself more profitable, the more WrestleMania was able to get into larger venues. We saw them gaining strength. and we saw them gaining market share.
My thing too was like, I think McMahon was in cahoots with somebody from WCW because I don't know if it was Brad Siegel or somebody he was friends with. They just pulled the rug out from underneath him.
Well, we know Vince McMahon was in cahoots with Paul Heyman because Paul Heyman wanted nothing more than to destroy Eric Bischoff, and rightly so, for snatching away a lot of his talent.
Yeah.
So Vince would do whatever he could up north just to offer ECW and WWF as viable alternatives to WCW.
Yeah. Heyman was smart. He knew what he was doing.
It still does.
But he was just bad at business.
Terrible.
Couldn't handle that. But like, McMahon was in cahoots with somebody because all of a sudden he bought the company real cheap. Freaking Jerry Jarrett offered $70 million to buy that company. And Vince bought it for like, what, 1.5, 2, maybe $2 million? Huh? That doesn't make any sense to me. He's in cahoots with somebody. He was probably, I heard, maybe even going to purchase the company in October 2000.
Are you sure it wasn't 120 million?
Oh yeah, it was 1.2. It was freaking cheap. He bought that for nothing. Which I don't know why.
He did. I'm trying to think. But the thing is, though, that didn't include superstar contracts, though.
No.
He would have to go out and sign them independently. Actually, that's why a lot of people didn't go to WWE, because they were still collecting WCW long-term paychecks. Instead of having to go wrestle,
Yeah, Mysterio, Goldberg, Flair, Hall, Nash, a lot of the other guys, they were still sitting at home doing what they wanted to do. But
without a company that was still paying them.
And it was a shame because I remember watching at the time they were starting to bring guys back I hadn't seen in a while, like Ice Train, Glacier, Road Warrior Animal. But then, I mean, not saying that they were going to save the company or anything, but it was just neat to see that. Like,
and they made some new stars. Like, I mean, Vampiro came out of nowhere and really, really immersed himself as a hardcore, very dark figure, similar to Sting and in, the same vein as Undertaker, Kane, New Church, something like that. He had his own style, he had his own thing.
Yeah, like, I just felt like
he was basically a giant evil luchador, which is really cool.
He was great. I think the problem, like, when WCW got bought out, was like this whole ridiculous like roster and core group of guys that you were so used to seeing, and even guys that would come and go, like they'd be there for a while and then they take a break and then they come back. They were always still with WCW. Once they sold that company, that was gone. A lot of those guys just never came back on TV.
And there was also the problem, and a lot of this we can apply to TNA now on a much smaller scale, is too much of a good thing, I think, ruined WCW because the NWO getting too big and Goldberg never losing a damn match.
Yeah,
that didn't help either.
No. And the roster was big, but who cares? I love the big roster. You could have 500 people.
I love the big roster too, but I mean,
it was hard to get everybody
over.
It's
hard to get everyone on TV, though. That's the problem. I mean, you have an endless fodder of victims for someone, to build them up and up and up, but
it's like you had 4 promotions in one. God, you could have Nitro, Thunder, and Saturday Night right there had their own group of guys.
I have an interesting factoid for you. We're actually doing this the night after UFC 159, I believe it was. Did you know that one of the people that was fighting for the light heavyweight title last night was originally part of the WCW power plant?
Nice.
Chael Sonnen, one of the fighters.
Oh, wow.
And I was reading that online. I'm like, I can't wait to tell Chris.
That's awesome.
I'd be interested to know that.
I'm dying, but...
That's how he adapted his interview style, was what he learned at the pro wrestling school.
Isn't that awesome?
Into MMA.
Look at that, another WCW guy still successful. Like, it was hard. I remember that was the worst day of my life. One of the top 5. Watching Vince McMahon on my television tell me that WCW was going to be his.
I remember watching, didn't Raw and, I believe Raw and Nitro aired that same night, and you could flip back between the two of them to see the end of it. And I remember WrestleMania when Shane McMahon showed up in a limo and that had WCW on it or something. I remember that. And I just remember watching the last Nitro, and even though it wasn't at the time my favorite company, I was a WWF guy, I got to admit I was very, very sad. I'm like, my God, am I really watching, the last WCW matches? Is Steiner versus Booker T really the last world title match I'm going to see? Is Sting and Flair really the last WCW match I'm going to see? Why is this ending? Like, I was really young then. I didn't understand.
And I was a smart fan. Like, when I was only 15 years old when this happened, and I was smart because I knew 2 things. That was going to be the last Nitro I was ever going to see. And B, that was going to be the last WCW show I was ever going to see, because I knew McMahon would screw it up, and he wouldn't do it the right way for business. I knew that he wouldn't be like Eric Bischoff, where he's like, well, we'll have, say if it was on the other, if the shoe was on the other foot, he'd be like, well, we'll just have the WWF programming because I want to make money off it. It makes sense. It's right for the industry, and it's right for the fans, and it's right for me business-wise. McMahon doesn't see it that way. He always sees it, it's me, and he lets that, this bitterness for, his personal reasons get the best
And
of him.
also, what got lost in the shuffle was the other company that was involved in this, Extreme Championship Wrestling. Now,
They really
at the
did.
time, I was young. I just assumed I didn't get the channel anymore because that would happen,
Yeah.
They would go off and I'd have to find them on a different network, and I was young, I would only see it on certain nights. I didn't know that they had went out of business until, I'd started hearing about, the rumblings that there was an invasion storyline and whatnot, and I saw Rob Van Dam show up on ECW.
And that was a shame,
Show up
too.
on Raw. I was like, whoa, RVD, great.
And that was a shame, too, because that's when, Carino was getting over. Just Incredible. Van
Raven,
Dam.
they had everybody.
Raven,
they didn't
Rhino.
But they didn't use Raven in the Invasion.
No, which was horrible.
Or Rhino.
Well, they used him, but it wasn't like
But it
he was
wasn't the role that he was
Yeah.
supposed to be because, RVD
They jobbed
became
him.
the main guy from ECW, but he was never ECW champion until 2006.
Yeah, I never understood why Raven was the mouthpiece for that, because that was his company. He was one of the big main eventers.
Absolutely.
He just was this silent jobber. It was horrible. It was
Pretty much.
horrible.
Because there was that awful hardcore title thing, which, that should have run its course within a year, and they should have gotten rid of it like the global title.
Ugh.
I hate the hardcore title. We'll get to that another day.
Absolutely. I mean, the invasion. Well, before we even go into that, that's just ugh.
It had a couple things going against it, first of all, because we had the big names already being paid to sit at home and do nothing.
Yeah, who are you going to bring? That was the biggest
And
question.
how much were you going to have to pay them
Yeah.
to get them off the couch when they're making money for free?
My theory was, why don't you just... I like what they were originally going to do. They originally were going to do this. They were going to make, two different brands, and they were going to have WCW, I think, on Saturdays or Thursday nights.
Probably whatever SmackDown would have been, because this was
Yeah.
all, I believe this was all pre-SmackDown, or was this right when SmackDown
This was
started?
right, it was like a year or two in.
Yeah.
So, it wouldn't have been a loss to get rid of SmackDown and put WCW on there. I think what they wanted to do was, have it on a different show, different night, but they were going to bring in a good group of guys. But then what they were also going to do is bring in, some of the guys that weren't getting over, like Billy Gunn,
And
Steve
cross them
Blackman,
over,
throw them over. I could see it. Who cares? But I heard McMahon, after watching the Booker T Bagwell match on Raw, which had no promotion, nothing, they just threw it on there in front of
And
us.
just announced we're going to have WCW programming with WCW announcers for, one or two matches a night on Raw.
In front of a WWF crowd. What do you expect? They're not going to do good. You're setting them up to fail. And I heard that McMahon, I think I read about this, was so mad that these guys couldn't work that he just pulled the plug on the whole thing. I'm like, well, that's sort of true, but I also heard that the network did not want WCW programming on there because they did not pay for WCW programming. WCW programming, they wanted WWE
and they
programming.
weren't going to pay for WCW programming.
Well, if I was McMahon, I'd be like, well, we got to figure out a way for them to do that because this is technically a part of us. But, of course, he didn't really make the effort. And
Well, the thing with that is that, even something like changing the logo, even though they're still considered WWE property, just marketing it as WCW and just changing that couple letter combination would still cost you money.
I think even waiting 5-6 months, that would have been fine. Because then you could finally finish off the older
And the
storylines.
timing of it, too, made no sense. Okay, Shane
Yeah.
McMahon shows up in a WCW limo, wrestles at WrestleMania against McMahon and whatnot, but then nothing happens at WrestleMania, and
Yeah.
you wait until afterwards.
That really hurted because, it was really a good storyline idea. Okay, the Sun's going to buy the opposing company. Wow, what a great concept. At least they're going to figure out a way to continue it and then, eventually probably bring in, Heyman and everybody else or whatever. And that made sense to me. I'm like, wow, the Sun's going to fight the dad. And better yet, the daughter is going to buy ECW. Wow, they got 3 different companies with the McMahons. That's perfect. And there's always going to be a feud in the war. That was a great concept. I like that. No problems here. No questions asked. But then we got into the execution of it. And the thing that pissed me off was...
building the roster.
Yeah.
That was where everything fell apart because you had WWF guys suddenly crossing over to a company they never worked for, that they had no loyalty to, and all of a sudden it's just to have filler to have everybody feuding with everyone.
I remember laughing to myself watching, the APA, get all the mid-carders, against, rallying them up to fight WCW. Meanwhile, freaking, Ming's there and Dean Malenko, 2 WCW mainstays that just, jumped ship a year or so ago. They're all like, oh, yeah, I'm going to kick their ass. No, you're not. Come on. Even though it's fake or whatever, looking as a fan, I'm like, no, come on.
And, I wouldn't want to fight Bradshaw, but, the convenient split up of Edge and Christian, it's you're just really struggling just to find people to put on each side here. That's really what you're doing. This is essentially a flag football game that you play on, Thanksgiving here.
Well, they waited too long to bring Chronic in. I don't know what they were waiting for.
And then when they finally came in, they booked them against two giants. Legitimate giants.
They should have waited for that build-up. And the thing is, too, those guys were hurt. I remember listening to Brian Clark's shoot interview. The guy played Adam Baum. He's like, we were both hurt, man. We weren't ready for this, and they were pushing us into it. I would have been like, well, let's hold off. But I mean, if they were going to do what they did, they should have brought in Chronic with Bagwell, DDP, and Booker T. At least you got a decent whatever.
And DDP didn't even come along till later, and he was a stalker. I mean,
I like how they brought him in. It was cool, but it's like, you don't need that.
But you know what? The match he had with The Undertaker was just The Undertaker beating the hell out of him with his fists, and then nothing ever came of it.
Yeah, it was...
He did win the European title, though.
Yeah, I know. And
that went the way of the dinosaur.
And I think it pissed me off, too, is they were making them heels. Fuck that. I don't want to see DDP as a heel. I want to see these guys as a viable company.
It did backfire with RVD, because when they came to Cleveland, the Invasion pay-per-view, the person that got the biggest pop first match of the night was Rob Van Dam.
Oh, they don't want to see him as a heel. No one wanted to see Kidman either as a bad guy.
No. Unless he was coming in as part of the flock, which that could have happened.
Yeah, but they didn't do that. And they had wasteful matches like Steven Regal against Raven for no apparent reason, and then Taz running in.
That's a good match on paper, but...
There's no point. I mean, there's no
stakes there.
It was frustrating. It was just...
But the biggest problem was the further up the ladder we went and where we went with the world titles. That was the biggest issue. And how they booked all that.
A nightmare. And then they bring Ric Flair in the night after it's over. Oh, you waited all that time to bring Flair in.
I'm buying...
half the company, which I should just be buying WCW and being the chairman, which would have made sense because he was still the commissioner of WCW when they went out.
Yeah.
Duh! The thing that frustrated me the most was...
It's like, wait, how little is WWE worth that Ric Flair can afford to buy half of it?
Exactly.
He can afford to buy half of my McDouble.
Exactly. And plus, like, even at the sloppiest point of a storyline where you're just half-assing it, it still would have fell into place. Flair could have just been the leader of it, and it still would have worked because he was still the commissioner.
Not the champion, but the figurehead.
He was still the figurehead when they went out. So even at the worst, not even trying. See, that's the thing that got on my nerves. Like, even when McMahon was trying his best to avoid it and, like, topple it, it still was supposed to go in that direction. But he just wouldn't let him, man.
No, he wouldn't. He refused to let somebody that he didn't create get over.
And back to the buyout. Now, Bischoff was going to be with Fusion Media. They were going to buy this and put this on ESPN. They were going to take about a month off. I heard they're going to have this in the Hard Rock studio or something.
Yeah, they were going to do something similar.
Build like a studio.
You know what? Is that the same place? You remember when ECW, toward the end of their run, that nice place they had when they were running it out of there and they were in one location? I think that might have been the same place.
We're at the...
You remember, like, it was kind of like almost outdoor?
Oh, that was like one of those, like... I know what you're talking about. It
was the Hard Rock, but, no.
It was something like that.
Bischoff did have a plan to do it at one of the... Just the one main arena was going to be their central. They weren't going to do live shows for... I mean, they were going to do... they'd be live in front of the crowd, obviously, but they weren't going to tour for a while to make some money.
Uh-huh.
I remember, that's when they were going to try to get another network.
Yeah, I mean, I just... Once that Fusion Media thing fell through, it was kind of disappointing because he was supposed to have, like, a Night of Champions on Nitro where all the... it was going to be really good. And all, they did, but it was going to be all the former WCW talent, but that just all fell in the shitter because McMahon bought it.
Yep.
But the company's supposed to go dark for 3 or 4 weeks, and then there was going to be
and Turner turned his back on it.
Yeah, he let it fall through.
Even though he was all gung-ho to get into the wrestling business, he backed out at the last minute when things started to go south.
Yeah.
Well, he was friends with Vince McMahon, too. That's another thing people forget. Those two were good friends.
I know. When that thing was supposed to go dark and he was supposed to be on Fusion Media, and I think they're supposed to be on ESPN or FX or God knows where else, I think it would have been good, and they were supposed to build a studio or something on top of a garage of the Hard Rock or something. They're going to have this huge, mini arena. It's kind of like the TNA
Impact Zone that we were used to, but probably a much better version than
fun to watch.
Universal Studios.
And you got to start small when you're starting over again, and that's fine because you got all the main event talent. No one's going to care where they're wrestling at. But I think it would have been okay to go dark because TNA went dark for a while, actually longer. So I think the anticipation would have been good. They were supposed to have this pay-per-view called The Big Bang, and I heard that some talent was kind of mad because they thought DDP was going to win the belt from Steiner, and that was going to be like his big push. But
wasn't he already world champion before that?
Yeah,
I don't care.
It's
big
not
push doesn't usually come on your 4th title run.
Yeah, it's not going to get me too mad. I don't care if DDP's the champion, but I think that would have been a great way to bring back WCW, a big pay-per-view, Big Bang. It'd be fun to watch, and they go from there. I also heard that Jerry Lawler was supposed to jump over. Somebody's also saying that Don the Cyrus was supposed to go, too. It'd be like a heel announcer.
He was also the network executive for ECW, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of ECW guys were showing up there, like Johnny Swinger, Jason Jett, who was like that Easy Money guy.
Yeah.
Kid Cash. So, I mean, the progression of it would have still been TNA anyway to a degree because James Storm was under contract with WCW, like the power plant guy. So was Chris Harris.
And that's the other thing about the scope of the invasion and the scope of WCW going under is what organizations spawned from this. I mean, we had XWF, which was around for a while. We had TNA.
Mm-hmm.
We had,
MLW was
indie feds really getting some traction, like Ring of Honor.
Mm-hmm.
They capitalized off that. And we also had XPW for a while, which
we
took
did.
over, some TV slots, but they were also, I believe, they were associated with adult films as well, which I found hilarious.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. They had some kind of connection there. It wasn't bad to watch. We all wanted ECW back, but
They
they
had
weren't.
Sabu.
And Terry Funk's arm, like, getting cut off and his, like, muscle hanging out. But it's once again, WWF fans not listening, or WWF not listening to their fans and wanting ECW back and all that. But
And they had an opportunity to do it when they had Paul Heyman as general manager of SmackDown. You had Rhino, you had Jericho, you had all these ex-ECW guys on SmackDown, and they were still doing hardcore type spots, and they could have just been ECW.
it could have, and they should have did that. I mean, I don't know what the worry was, but when they brought it back, it was too late.
You know what's sad? One of the storylines they did in SmackDown vs. Raw 2006 was better than anything that WWE actually did with the whole invasion.
Is that sad?
There's a thing where I play as the Undertaker,
Excuse me.
and they had Rob Van Dam win the belt at the Royal Rumble, the undisputed, the WWE title, and he spray painted ECW on the front of it.
Wow.
And they brought ECW back, and then you, as the Undertaker, whoever you were, had to fight him at WrestleMania to take the belt. Well, I lost the match on purpose.
Oh, well, rightfully so.
Even though that created a blemish on the Undertaker's record at WrestleMania, for me it was worth seeing RVD with the ECW WWE title.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the invasion... Well, I mean, back to the WCW thing. They had AJ Styles. Daniels was supposed to team with Vampiro to become some kind of group thing. So that was going to be good.
And they had the talent. I mean, looking back on it, hindsight's 20/20, but I mean, we would have been able to see that they had talent even back then.
Well, even if this didn't happen and WCW kept going, the TNA talent was still there, so it didn't really matter, to a degree. I mean, we were going to see the TNA guys anyway. They were going to be there. And I think in a better light. I really do. I think because AJ Styles, I don't know if he would have been as big. I don't think early on.
No, the problem is they would have caged him and kept him in the light heavyweight title picture.
He wouldn't have get a decent push probably to 4 or 5, which was rightfully so because WCW had way too much talent for him to get in there.
Yeah.
Earlier on, at least. But they had Chris Daniels. I mean, I think I even saw Paul London being an audience member one time getting pushed by Steiner. So everyone was going to be there who was going to be there that we wanted to see anyway. So really, if we didn't get TNA, oh well. Because trust me, WCW would have been a hell of a lot better than what we got now.
That's certainly true, yeah. I mean, I think definitely there were some opportunities for that, yeah.
And I'm sure James Storm and Harris probably would have teamed. They were there anyway. I mean, everyone was there. Anyone from TNA you wanted to see.
The crossover, we still would have been able to see some of those guys if there had been a partnership and whatnot. One showed, run and whatnot.
I think Daniels with Vampiro would have been great.
Oh, absolutely.
Because he was actually the guy, because Daniels got signed like 2000. He was actually, he was on an episode, I think, of Nitro. He was like this guy under this robe, but they never showed him because then they just went out.
It was Vince McMahon's stubbornness that has persisted even till this day.
I know.
He buries people that either came from another company, except in the cases of ROH where he apparently just shoots them right to the top, which I don't agree with.
Well, he's in Sting right, too. He never really trusted how McMahon would treat his character. But you got to admit, though, McMahon wasn't that bad to Goldberg. Goldberg won the belt. He beat almost everybody.
Yeah, I really don't know what Goldberg...
I don't know what his beef is. Yeah, I really don't know.
I can see what almost everybody that has a problem with Vince McMahon, where their beef comes from. Bill Goldberg, to me... I mean, I bag on The Rock for being a selfish wrestler a lot, but to me, I don't think anyone was more selfish than Bill Goldberg. I mean, my God, what did he lose? 8 matches his entire career?
Exactly, and freaking comes on the No Way Out pay-per-view, whatever, and beats The Rock.
Kills The Rock.
Yeah, so what's What is his beef? You'll be one of the biggest names in the
He
business.
beat Triple H twice to win the world title.
Exactly. I mean, and he beat Brock Lesnar at Mania before he left.
Yeah, that was his last
Jesus.
match. He beat Lesnar.
He got over more than anybody, I think. Didn't fight The Undertaker, though.
No, he didn't. But The Undertaker also wasn't dead at that time until WrestleMania 20, which was his last night.
Yeah.
So
That's one thing. TNA could not compete in 04 against WWE.
Goldberg, if you look at people where they are now and the world titles that they've won, he destroyed Mark Henry. He destroyed Batista. He destroyed Triple H. I mean, this was way before they were... Well, I mean, Triple H was obviously a world champion then, but Mark Henry went on to become, world champion. Batista went on to be one of their biggest stars in 2005 through 2007.
Isn't Goldberg kind of like Warrior, where he just didn't really understand the business too much, and then ends up being bitter about it, and making more of a career of being outside the ring complaining about it than he actually did inside? That's what it seems like to me. You can see the similarities there.
In some ways, yes, and I just think... the Ultimate Warrior was a more interesting person than Bill Goldberg. I mean, okay, you're big, you're an ex-football player, you look like Steve Austin, but you're not Steve Austin, and you do the same thing every single week. You have 3 main moves, you don't adapt to people's styles, you don't take a bump for anybody, you're useless.
Wasn't that even like... Wouldn't that be a neat feud? Warrior and Goldberg? Oh
no,
my God.
I think that would have just been a god-awful match. Because
it would have.
You know what?
But in theory.
It would have been funny, though, because they both would have had to beat the hell out of each other just to knock the other one down because they were too proud to fall.
Yeah.
They would have literally killed each other.
God, WCW just had everybody there. I mean, anyone you could imagine was there. I mean, it was ridiculous.
But they also...
They were their own enemy, really.
Their attempts to top WWF, like... The hardcore division was junk. I hated it. But WCW's attempt at hardcore wrestling was even worse. Do you remember the moving vehicle match? Whatever the hell it was, and you remember the junkyard brawl?
Oh, God.
I mean, it's like you're doing
it was fun
this
to watch, but yeah.
to the point of absurdity and putting wrestlers' careers at risk for nothing.
Yeah, Silver Green got thrown through like a windshield and got like 100-something stitches on his shoulder.
They
Jesus.
got so far away from the wrestling, at least when WWE would do something and for shock value and whatnot, it was on a limited scale and, not that many people got hurt or burned.
I know, WCW, like, that was the main problem. It was... And this is the problem with TNA and so on and so on. There's a non-wrestling person running the company. That's the biggest problem.
There are old stars that absolutely refuse to step out of the spotlight. And the worst part of it is you have an old star with creative control, and you have an old star that's friends with the person that has creative control otherwise. And I'm talking about Eric Bischoff.
I know.
In many ways, he was an asset, but as we see right now in TNA, huge liability.
Yeah, I mean, what's he really going to produce here at the end? I don't know.
His TV shows are better than anything he's ever done in wrestling.
Bischoff would have been great if he came to TNA when they first started, but he was so burned out at the time he didn't want to give it a go. I think he would have been more valuable back then.
I honestly, the best memories I have of Eric Bischoff are as a prick general manager on Raw. That was the only thing that I felt that he could do well.
It was so annoying, though. I'm like, why isn't this... It would always go back to why isn't this WCW?
Or like,
why?
Or I'd look at one of the superstars and be like, man, I remember way back. Why are they doing this now?
Well, even like I remember Vince Russo got signed again. And in 2003, he wanted to start the Invasion again because Flair was there, Goldberg, Eric Bischoff, Kevin Nash, Hogan. I mean, pretty much everybody. Booker T... I mean, they're all there.
That was one of those things, though, where the stipulation, they were so soundly defeated that it just would have been dumb. And do you remember the couple of nights after that when it was Punishment Week and Vince McMahon took anyone that was involved with the invasion and they all lost matches in brutal fashion?
Yeah.
I remember they had the Dudley Boys kill RVD the Monday night after the pay-per-view where WWF had victory. I'm like, I was hoping they weren't going to bury him, and thank God they didn't after that. But they had him. Everyone that was associated with the invasion lost their match that next night, pretty much.
It was just frustrating. I mean, the whole invasion was exciting but confusing at the same time as a fan because it's like, well, why aren't they bringing in? I don't want to see Stone Cold plays guitar and go what all day. I want to see Goldberg kick someone's ass.
And I don't want to see Stone Cold. Yeah, he hates Vince McMahon, but he also gets his checks signed, go to WCW and get paid by Vince. It makes no sense.
Well, it was watering down when they were bringing all these WWF guys to join them. It was like, what?
And then you have remember when Booker T showed up as WCW champion and the man lost the WCW title within 2 weeks to Kurt Angle? I mean, he won it back 5 days later, but he still lost the belt within 2 weeks of being there.
They're like a traveling band of gypsies. They had nowhere to go. They had nothing. It was just
no direction.
Chuck Palumbo.
The person that had the most wrestling talent was put all the way at the bottom of the card, and that was Rob Van Dam.
Absolutely.
Here, win the hardcore title.
Yeah, if you feel like it. I mean, it's a Wednesday. Go ahead.
Jeff Hardy's ass, but, you're our brightest star, but we're not going to put you in the big tag matches. We're just going to fill it up with ex-WWF guys. Have fun.
Well, I heard a rumor, too, that he was going to go to WCW in 2001. Like, once Bischoff got everything under control. I don't think they would
have used him right either.
I don't know. I wouldn't. I think they would.
And
they were pushing Lance Storm like crazy, man. He won every title except the world.
He should have been world champion.
He would have probably if they would have kept going.
Stone Cold Steve Austin ruined Lance Storm.
Oh, absolutely.
I will never forgive him for that.
Making him boring. You could have said that about Benoit. You could have said that about Malenko.
Speaking of which, where were they during the invasion? I don't even remember them.
Malenko just stepped out. He just kind of went behind the scenes, and Benoit got hurt.
It wasn't until 2003 that the Radicals came, when it was Guerrero and Benoit.
That was 2000, yeah.
That was 2000?
Yeah.
But they were still together after that. They were
still going on.
WrestleMania 17, but they weren't really involved in the invasion. It didn't seem like.
That's when Guerrero left because he was on drugs.
Oh.
Saturn was still there, but Malenko went behind the scenes. He kind of left in July or August.
Had his neck injury?
He had his neck injury, so that's where that all went. And Triple H got hurt. One of the big names too. Jericho was there, but he just sucked. No one cared.
Was he part of the invasion?
He was in WWF, yeah.
Wait. Why the hell didn't they have him go back to WCW?
That makes sense, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Because was it 17 or 18 that was the undisputed title match? 17, right?
18.
18, yeah. No, so 7, yeah.
They could have had him jump. They could have had, I mean...
It made no sense. It was sloppy booking. Test was in it for a while, too. I'm like,
yeah.
What?
Well, even under, they brought in guys like Bobby Eaton as a trainer. They brought in a decent roster, but it was all young guys that they could make, do with. Fit Finley was there. They actually had the guy that played Sick Boy from Raven's Flock. He was there. He was like a guy they used for dark matches. And there's a lot of people there. It's just they wouldn't do anything right with him. They just didn't care. That's what it came down to. They didn't care.
They just wanted a way to write off WCW as quickly as they could, make them look strong at first, and then get rid of them.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they did.
I really wish if Bischoff would have bought it, man. I mean, it just would have been amazing. That first relaunch, holy hell, this is going to happen. I think it would have been great. And one of our podcast shows, I'm going to go into detail. Someone wrote. There's actually going to be 2 shows. We rebook it, and this other guy rebooked it. WCW Lives, this guy by Ralph Harden. He just did this last month, March. Did the whole rebooking of the invasion angle. Not invasion, I'm sorry, of WCW if Bischoff would have. Yeah, it is pretty damn good. Yeah, I'm really liking it. And I'll read through it one podcast. It's pretty good. It's really good, actually. But it's just the whole thing was just frustrating as a fan. And McMahon didn't care, but imagine how many fans they lost. Loyal Atlanta fans, they lost because they just left.
And not only that, they go back years later and give Atlanta one of the worst WrestleManias I've ever seen.
Yeah,
with The Miz and John Cena. That put me off of wrestling off of WWE for 6 or 7 months, and then I went back to it. And then when Daniel Bryan won the world title, I went back off of it. So that pay-per-view was so bad that I gave up on that company for a while.
Yeah, it's just whatever.
And I gave up on them again recently.
That's what's hurt them, I think, to rebuild their fan base. That's why they went to this PG stuff. I think because they lost so many fans.
Bringing back people for guest appearances and signing them to limited dates when they would never have to do that before.
It's amazing.
Was your other champion. You never had to bring back The Rock or anybody because you had a viable star people would pay to see.
No one wants to see these guys, and they haven't done a good job building them.
No, they haven't done a good job building them at all. You had The Miz being a world title match, and then all of a sudden he's back in the mid-card.
Well, they always did this push and pull, like they did with Shelton Benjamin, Kennedy, Hardy.
They ruined Shelton Benjamin.
Oh my God!
They ruined countless.
Zack Ryder. I mean, they push him and they pull him back and they bury him. I don't get it.
Finley, too.
Finley.
They made him a stopgap and had him be the guy that everyone beat, just because he was tough. But you could have built him up as a legitimate world title contender. Can you imagine him against Angle, the amateur matches?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it would have been great.
It's a shame. I think I remember watching that WrestleMania, and they showed WCW and like they were like in a skybox. I was like, oh wow, I can barely see them. I think the problem was it just happened too quick where they weren't prepared for it, and the XFL was going on, and it's like, what do we do with all this?
Yeah, they hemorrhaged a lot of money out for that, and then they had to pay all their own talent, run their own expenses, and then have to pay extra wrestlers. So I mean, yeah, granted it was a financial squeeze, but then you wait. You can do the invasion at a later date. The smart thing to do would have been had WCW go away for a while, and then have rumblings of them coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Like they could do like little short 30-second video packages like they always do for The Undertaker, and you just be like, what is this? Why are they showing this?
I know, it's like, good lord. I don't get it. Like, very frustrating, It's just like, good lord. Like, why even... If you're not going to do it right, don't do it at all,
And what seemed so even at one point became just an avalanche of defeat for WCW at the end.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the matches weren't... I mean, they were, somewhat competitive, but they lost every single one of them.
Yeah, just terrible. Here's who they brought in. This is who they brought in apparently for this whole invasion, or just the buyout. I'm going to tell you the roster: Lance Storm, Mike Lawson, Mark Jindrak, Chavo Guerrero, Sean O'Hare, Sean Stasiak.
Thank God they have Chavo Guerrero.
I know. How about that? Stacy Keibler, Arn Anderson, Billy Kidman, Billy Silverman, the referee. Booker T, Brian Adams, Brian Clark.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but Arn Anderson could not even wrestle at that point, could he?
Well, no, but he was an announcer, I guess. Bagwell.
He couldn't even talk at that point, could he?
Yeah, he could. Charles Robinson, Chuck Palumbo, David Flair, Diamond Dallas Page, Evan Courageous, Shane Helms, Hugh Morris, Jamie Noble, Johnny Stamboli, Canyon, Kaz Hayashi, Lashley LaRue. They already had Mark Jindrak, I think, listed.
45% of these people should not have been under contract.
Well, let me see. Mike Sanders, Nick Patrick, Primetime Elix Skipper, Reno, Scott Hudson was announcer, Tori Wilson, Yang. Let me see who else. They also brought in Bobby Heenan. He was like a trainer. Fit Finley. They also brought in the lady that was, or the cat. He was an announcer. They also brought in, remember Paisley, who was with who was Booker T's wife? Or what? They brought her, Charmel. They brought her in. They also brought in Jimmy Wang Yang. He was a part of it, but they never put him on TV.
Thank God.
Yeah. They signed The Wall. They signed Jason Jett. They also signed Kid Romeo.
I remember Kid Romeo.
Yeah. So they signed these guys, and there might have been a few others, but I think that's pretty much it. But they brought in these guys that were all like, the future stars, which I get. But they should have brought in a hell of a lot more mid-carders.
The problem is they weren't names. That was the biggest issue. Looking back on them, we think, okay, that guy was good, damn, that guy was good. But then, we were like, who?
They're good to start something with. I get what they were doing because they're looking towards the future. But
if you got to put them in there with the people that WWF is going to be fronting, like Taker and Kane, and just, no.
This isn't going to work. Exactly. But they should have brought in Jarrett, but he hates McMahon.
The Giant.
Shane Douglas. Well, Giant, he was there.
He could have jumped ship, though. I mean,
exactly.
They had him.
Bigelow, Bam Bam Bigelow.
Jerry Lynn,
Vampiro, Conan. There's a lot of other guys around that were mid-carders that were decent, that, the Steiner brothers, that people, well, they weren't really mid-carders, but people would have enjoyed, and they just, Alex Wright, Disco Inferno, people that they know, but they just didn't do it. But Alex Wright was contacted by them, he said, but he just, Disco Inferno was signed too, I think, but he was. He didn't last long. He asked for his release. I'm going to look at it again real quick, but...
Now here's the question, though. Do you think that a lot of people that we've seen be former world champions in both organizations would have gotten a crack and would have, risen to the levels that we've seen them now? Do you think Batista would have made it? Do you think The Miz would have made it? Do you think John Cena even would have made it?
That's a good question.
I mean, do you think do you think CM Punk would have been able to break into this business? I don't know.
Well, yeah, that's a good question because like a lot of those guys, maybe they would have been held back. Maybe they would.
That's what I was thinking because you got to think just playing the percentages. Some of them wouldn't have made it, and some of them, while we would have liked the WCW guys, a lot of them I really don't know that I would want to part with in revisionist history and have someone else instead.
Exactly. I mean, you figure they would have almost like double the roster.
I mean, thank God there would be no Daniel Bryan, but I'm not going to give up Batista just to not have Daniel Bryan.
I get what you mean. I definitely get what you mean. Um, I think the problem too is like you figure you got this whole other. That was another problem too. They signed all these extra guys. So God, there's another 60 guys coming in or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's really hard to figure out where to put who and
Live shows, and let alone who's going to win the match.
yeah. I mean, it's just like, geez.
But I mean, we're missing the notable names. You know, Bret Hartley, he was injured. You know, by that time we have Goldberg, we have Hogan, we have all the big names, Savage,
Mm-hmm.
none of which were present.
I know, it's just like, geez. Yeah, Savage. I think because he hated McMahon, McMahon hated him or something. That's why he didn't show up.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of bad blood. But I remember listening to Lenny Poffo's shoot interview, and he said the reason why he hated McMahon so much is because his dad wanted to be in this battle royal that was in like a house show. It was with a bunch of legends. He wanted to see his friends again. And he said, if you can get me in it for great or whatever, try to get me in, son. And Randy didn't want to disappoint his dad because he loved his dad a lot, and he wanted to make sure he could take care of him. So he asked them do a favor for him, and they didn't do it. That pissed him off so bad because he was so good at WWE or whatever.
And it was just a battle royal.
Yeah.
Just one time in the ring.
It's like, geez, would it have hurt them to put Angelo Poffo in a battle royal? I mean, ugh, jeez. I'm trying to find this roster real quick just to make sure I didn't miss anybody.
And also, too, I don't know that we would have seen a lot of people split off from tag teams. I think they would have kept a lot of teams together for a longer time, which would have been better for the tag team division, but maybe worse for the main eventers.
Why did they do that? Why did they split up the Dudleys? Why they split up the Hardys? I mean, it didn't really help.
Well, it did in a way, because Jeff Hardy went on to become a world champion, Edge
Mm-hmm.
went on to become a world champion, Christian became a forgettable world champion.
Yeah.
The Dudleys, I just think they didn't feel like paying them enough, and they just kind of wanted to spotlight whoever their flavor of the month was as the tag team champion, and it never really worked out as well as they thought it would.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to have the Dudleys be viewed as too dominant of a team, so they went to TNA and said, fine, we'll go do our own thing here. And it worked out for both of them pretty well, in hindsight.
Well, here's a question. I mean, when they split up Devon, I mean, a lot of times they just went back to the tag teams anyway. Like the Hardys got back together, I think.
Yeah, pretty much.
Everyone got back together because it just didn't work. Trying to find this roster. It's never been a problem to find this.
I mean, there's just so much that they could have used with existing parts, and that's what makes us so mad, is because they had the pieces, they just they arranged them in the wrong way. They built the jigsaw puzzle the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
And turned it into a giant WWF logo. And that was our problem with it.
I know, man. It's like, geez. Let me see if I can find the roster.
But it made for good TV. Do you remember some of the interview segments they did, like with all the drama? I remember them confronting Freddie Blassie. And Shane McMahon and Stephanie McMahon told him, just like you are pretty soon, WWF is going to die. And I was just like, whoa. It's messed up and funny.
Oh, they also brought in was, who was the other guy from 3 Count?
Shane Helms?
The other one, the blonde hair one? Shannon Moore. They signed him.
Yeah. He never got a good push.
No,
Poor Shannon Moore.
He's another guy, man. He just beat up and dragged out. And so they brought in a lot of the younger guys, the guys that you wouldn't think would have got signed. I'm surprised they didn't put The Wall on TV.
Shannon Moore took a beating better than almost anybody I can remember.
I'm surprised Disco Inferno didn't get on
They
TV.
had Tommy Dreamer, too. Because he showed up that first night with Van Dam.
Yeah, that was surprising too.
I hate Tommy Dreamer.
Well, it's like one of those things where it's like,
Any real
why?
ACW fan hates Tommy Dreamer, let's be honest. Whoring himself out, collecting a paycheck with a silver or platinum ECW title, fighting Christian every week. You gotta be kidding me.
Jesus Christ. It's just like, oh my God, Tommy Dreamer. I remember him when he came back for the TNA pay-per-view, and he's like, wasn't this the greatest match ever with him and Raven? I'm like, no. This really wasn't.
He was so upset when Jenko Pants went out of business because that's all that he had. He never changed his gimmick.
Yeah, he really didn't. He got so old. Remember he was eating the food or something, eating like the random food?
I remember him carrying around the bucket of puke whenever he had to fight Biker Taker.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really remember him. He was drinking out of urinals, too. I remember that. No, I'm not even kidding. That was actually what they had him doing on Raw the one night.
I'd be so mad. Be like, no. Maybe Disco didn't sign up to WWE. I thought he did. I'm taking a look. I know Alex Wright didn't because he was too tired.
By the way, if you're interested in healthy dieting tips, Glenn Gilberti always has some good tips.
Okay, I'm sorry. He really does. God bless Glenn. He helped me lose some weight. Apparently, the WWF did not sign the discount for him. They neglected to acquire his contract. Well, shame on them.
So instead, they waited 10 years and signed somebody named Fandango.
Disco needs to go back to TNA. So does, what's his name? Who's the other guy? Colt Cabana. There's a guy like...
You know what, though? I'm so tired of hearing people say that Colt Cabana needs to do this and Colt Cabana needs to do that. Because you know what? At a certain point, Colt Cabana should have already done it.
I know.
I'm tired of him. It's like, look, you were in IWC or whatever. You sucked then. You look like Samoa Joe. You have a pretty good gimmick going, and JCW is the cop. But there's a reason you're not famous.
I like him as Officer Colt Cabana. That's hilarious.
Yeah, I like him as that, but I don't feel like Colt Cabana. And I love the Art of Wrestling podcast, but I really don't feel like... Yeah, I don't need to see the man be in WWE and be a champion. I'm sorry. I just don't.
Let me see something here.
I think he got beat by Jerry Lawler the one night I was watching IWC, and I was really confused.
Trying to find like the entire WCW legal roster, like who was there. And
The problem with that is, though, a lot of people worked without a contract. They just paid for the dates they wrestled.
yeah, and I wonder who that was. I wish someone had like this wealth of information. Maybe I can go look at public record, like who was under the contract.
Or find, like, an idiot savant. That would help.
Are they really going to help?
Well, they might. It's going to take a while to find one interested in WCW and not, like, trains.
Trying to find like just some kind of legal.
Just type in WCW full roster 2001.
That's what I do, but it's just everybody I already know, and I know there's more. Like I know there's the Power Plant guys. I know there's like Buddy Lee Parker. They're not putting it on there.
See, does WWF own those records, though?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Legally, I'm going to find this.
or illegally if you have to, and we just won't reveal your sources.
Because I want to know, but in the big scheme of things so far, we've taken a look at the invasion. We haven't really gone full detail yet. It's gonna be scary, and then we'll always go into like what if. I like to talk about too, like before what was happening, guys were coming back.
Company,
yeah,
who was coming back. What kind of the current trends were? Who were some stars that were getting over? Who were some stars that were fading?
it was funny that like on Nitro, I kept on seeing like ECW guys coming. Like, oh, there's this guy. Oh, there's that guy. Yeah, they're just bringing them in.
For a long time, WCW was feuding with a stupid reality show called Battle Dome. Do you remember that?
I remember that. That went nowhere, right? Like, it just didn't happen.
No,
like,
and you know what was funny? I used to like Battle Dome. I used to watch it, and then they canceled it. But I was all excited because all these WCW people would show up. And they'd interrupt the athletic competition. I think somebody got really hurt because of it, actually.
I could see that happening.
The one guy that looked like K-Quick tore an ACL when I was watching it, I'm pretty sure. Because he fell off basically this spinning children's playground toy and really tore up his knee. But it wasn't K-Quick, it was somebody that was like 6'7".
Okay, quick. I remember that. Remember he was teaming like Road Dogg. That was another person that was going to go to WCW. Was Road Dogg. That was the big rumor. Road Dogg's coming. Road Dogg's on his way.
Whoa, look out.
I know.
Get the doghouse ready.
See, now here it says, like, on this other website that Discount Furniture was sent to developmental and never used. I don't know. I think he might have been. Crowbar. That's another one.
Yep.
It was funny, too. They also threw in, like, Earl Hebner's son as, like, a ref. I'm like, get him. He was never in WCW. As soon as I saw him on, like, on one of the Raws or whatever, I'm like, no, he was. Get him out of here.
Your reaction to it was much stronger than mine, where I just thought it was business as usual.
Exactly. Hugh Morris was signed, of course. He didn't really do much, huh?
I remember he always missed the moonsault that he always used to hit in WCW. He won a couple of matches.
They should have put the flock together because they had Sick Boy, they had Kidman, they had Raven.
They could have just put a big guy with him.
Yeah, somebody else was throwing there. There you go, there's a flock. Nope. Why would they do that? That makes sense.
Kevin Nash came back for a while in 2003.
Well, then there was the whole NWO coming in, but that was Johnny coming.
So bad.
Well, it's just like
I was like, why is Shawn Michaels in the NWO, and why did he just super kick the Big
Booker
Show?
T's joining, Goldust is on the way, Ric Flair joined for about a minute.
Big Show was he always fought against the NWO.
Well, the problem, too, is like, everybody and their mother was joining again, but the problem was, all right, WWE's gone, but now we're going to have this for a while, and then that's going to be gone. It's like they just didn't keep it around. They could have just did so much with it all, and they just...
I mean, I understand that a lot of the factions disappear, but it's really bad when none of the people associated with the factions are still there. Like, when the Right to Censor broke up, everyone was gone. It wasn't just like, oh, they're still here under different names. No, they were gone.
Yeah, that was it. That was a shame they ended that, because I like that.
Buchanan.
Finally, they gave Stevie Richards an idea and a concept that was going to work for him. I love him to bring that back. It'd be a great time to bring that on there when Fandango's dancing. That goes off. That's his big feud. Stevie Richards, man. I'm going to censor you. Perfect. There we go. See, I'm writing the storylines as we go here. But there's so much more to talk about. There's so much more detail and depth that I'm worn out tonight, and I know you are too, probably.
Yep.
But all I gotta say is
the booking.
The booking. I mean, you could have had Norman Smiley wrestle Crash Holly, and no one win the match because they're both too afraid. So many things that could have happened that I could have booked. I mean, Jesus Christ.
Well, that might have been funny. I don't know that it really would have been a good match, but it would have been useful.
Just hiding from each other for like 10 minutes, and then like somebody comes out and just destroys them. Like the Eliminators come out and just kill both of them. I would have loved that. Hip, hip, hooray. But, I guess that just wasn't apparently the case. Also, another thing I want to talk about, too, is the developmental systems. What they had to do with the whole invasion and all that, and the buyouts, and what could have happened, what could have changed.
We can also talk about how different the developmental systems are now, where they actually get publicity for some reason.
Exactly.
I actually have to hear about these people that I had never even heard of. People that I have to Google just to figure out who the hell they are.
There's Heartland Wrestling and there's Ohio Valley. Those seem to be like the two bigger ones. Yeah, Florida. Yeah, Florida. God, the invasion, man.
It was a dark time period, Chris. I understand.
Well, and the frustrating part, too, is like you'd see the tease on WWE, like the cat will be on there. I'm like, why isn't he in the ring wrestling? And like they'd still be hinting at just teasing you. You know the roster's there. You know everyone's there, but they're not going to do it. They're going to say, no, Chris, you can't have that. You're not going to have WCW ever again.
We'll not have it as a brand like we did for a while with ECW. We gave you false hope with that and, thought, oh, man, they brought back ECW because it's a smaller company. Maybe next is WCW. No.
Well, the Chronic thing, too, got on my nerves. Like, I understood the whole Big Show and Taker versus them. And those guys were all kind of buddies anyway.
Taker and Kane, wasn't it?
Yeah, sorry, Kane. But why didn't they just do that in Mania for 02? They just... Why was Stevie Richards managing?
That was just a bad tag team then, though, because to me, they're either a really bad headache or really, really good weed.
I like them, though, because they were wrestlers, like, I guess, from the future. But...
Wait, that was their gimmick? I just
that's
thought
they
were
thought.
Really, really big people.
They were, like, these futuristic, like, they look like Marty McFly or Doc Brown with his glasses, and they had the cape. The thing is, though, like, why didn't they go after the Acolytes first?
They were the ones that always made me laugh. The Armstrong brothers, maybe?
Probably. They always get beat up and dropped.
So hard when I would watch Saturday nights.
If they're in a battle royal, they're guaranteed to be like the first ones thrown out because they're not going to last long. Let me tell you something, okay? One of the greatest, worst battle royals I've ever seen was WCW Pro from 1995, right before World War III. Freaking like Dave Sullivan, the Barrio Boys, and Nasty Ned were all in that, and Disco Inferno's in there too. I mean, just ridiculous.
Honorable mention to Royal Rumble. What was it? 95. Big Dick Murdoch.
Yeah, Dick Murdoch.
The honorable mention for the superstar, the guest appearance.
It was so funny. He got so dizzy, he fell out of the ring. Hey, why not?
Do you remember the Christian being thrown to the lines, Daniel Puder at the one Rumble?
Oh my God. I would I don't know if they were shooting or...
I'd have thrown myself out at that point.
I would have started
shit out of him.
I would start UFC in those guys. They were doing that bullshit to me. I'd be like, forget this. Apparently Daniel Puder has this bad rep for like taking down Angle or whatever.
We never saw him again.
Nah. I saw him on one of those Sunset Tan. He was dating one of the girls on there.
One of the Ollie girls? Why do I
something
remember
like that? Yeah. Well, it was a lasting impression. Their stupidity.
There actually were hot chicks on that show.
There were some good-looking girls, but a lot of them were just jerks.
Yeah.
But it didn't last. You see where that gets you. But Pewter, man, I don't know. I mean, he was like, he kind of shoot it on angle, and Angle's like, well, he just told me died, wasn't really trying or whatever. I don't know. That could have been a fun feud. Maybe TNA would bring that back. I don't know. 10-year reunion? Just put Pewter in there anyway. Why not? Who cares? Storylines don't matter,
Such
right?
a bad name.
Ugh.
Pewter. Look out, it's Pewter.
Pewter.
Well, I'm Peck.
I'm Chris. We'll see
We
you.
will get into this in more detail.
Absolutely.